I'm going to be trying to build a tool and build a site where people can book meetings for reInvent. This is because there's loads of people that I'd love to meet up with at reInvent, and unfortunately there's not an easy way to organize all of that. As well as that, there are other people that obviously want to meet me as well, and I want there to be a nice easy way for us to meet each other, but also if you've got an hour between sessions, being able to kind of just book or see who's available and then book a session with them, and you can then have a useful use of that time and get to network with people that you might not normally actually get to spend some time with and get to know. So this idea I'm going to base vaguely on the Meetup website. So if I go across to here and go into Meetup, so the idea is that the landing page will look something like this, where you'll have available meetings, or if you have some booked meetings, your booked meetings, and then there is a way to both sign yourself up, create a profile in your availability, or if you're looking to meet up with someone, then you can search the available meeting slots and then do things like filter based on topic. So now that we've kind of discussed that, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the tool that we're going to be using. So one thing that I've been working on recently is a SaaS startup tool for serverless. And what that allows you to do is basically build a fully production ready serverless SaaS app as quickly as possible. So if I just jump back into my code, I've copied this repo into a remeet folder, and we're basically going to get started. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I am going to basically change the config in this repo. So this has been designed to be as simple as possible, to basically go from 0 to I have it working development, and then as quick just to push into production, and then you've got a production hardened repo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into config, because we need to change the app name, the prefix, as well as any domain names, app names and descriptions. So if we go into config, then in here we have a default configuration. This is applied to all of the environments. So first, the app prefix. This will be attached to the front of any of the resources that we use. And I'm actually going to start a timer, as you see in the top of the screen. So I'm just going to go down into my tool, and I'm going to start a timer to see how long this actually takes. So let's start that going. Okay, so app prefix, we're going to change that to be remeet. My email, I'm going to change that just to be remeet. Keep my email address. Stripe success and cancel URLs will stay the same. This repo actually has built-in billing alarms, so I can get an email sent to myself anytime the account goes above $50 of spend a month. The app name, I'm going to change this obviously, so the app name is going to be remeet, and I'm going to call this boost your reinvent networking. Might change that in the future, but for now it doesn't really matter too much. And the description, let's delete all of this, and I'm going to go with the best way to find people to connect with at reInvent and grow your network. So yeah, just used a bit of transcription there. Tweak this a little bit. Domain name is going to be remeet, and by the way, I am using the Cursor AI IDE. So that's what I'm using, and that's where all this autocomplete. For some reason, transcription is still working. So sorry about that. Transcription was still running in the background. So as well as setting the domain name, which I just need to fix, in this template, there is a set of Stripe integrations built in so that you don't have to go through and build all of that by custom yourself every time. And you can have plans, but because this is going to be a free tool, what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to delete all of the plans out of there because, yeah, we don't need to have any Stripe plans. There's some colors, some themes, some auth setup. Most of this stuff we don't need to change. And I'm going to go down to development, and I have all my config details. And what we can do in here, we don't need the Stripe API key or the Stripe webhook. The email from, I'm going to just change that to remeet. And because we're using Next, on the front end, and we're using the Next auth, we need to have a secret. So I'm going to say generate a random Next auth secret. So this is just going to generate a new secret for us, completely random. Obviously, I'm not going to be showing you the production version, but yeah, all you need to do is just create a random secret in here. That gets copied both into the Next.js app, but also is used inside the Lambda so that we can authenticate any requests. And now we've done all of that, we can save it. Let's go back to here. So I've changed the app prefix, changed the app name, domain names, descriptions, and all of that. So next it is on to setting up Google Auth. So in our config, if we go and find our Google Auth, where am I looking? Okay, so in here, so in our local environment variables, we have a Google ID and a Google secret. And the way we get those is if we go across into our editor and open up Google, we're going to, in here, create a new project. And that new project is going to be called remeet. I'm going to call this remeet dev because that's the one we want to do, and create this. And in a couple of seconds, we'll see that remeet will be created. So that's done. So we can select that project. And what we need to do is we need to configure the consent screens and basically set this up. So now that we're in here, we need to go to API services and OAuth consent screens. And this is going to be an external tool for basically anyone can sign up. It's not just for our users in our company. So we're going to hit create remeet dev. Going to use my default email. For now, just going to skip the logo because we can do all that later. And in here, we can. I wonder if can we just skip the app domains and authorize domains. So remeet. So I'm going to call this dev-remeet.com, but I'm also going to add localhost 3000 so that we can basically access it from our localhost. That's not the right thing. Has that worked? Okay, so you can't specify this remeet.com. So for some reason it is not allowing us to use this. Let's try the new experience. Meet Sam next. External next. Continue, create. Invalid domain. There we go. Need to go back to API and services. OAuth consent screen. Credentials. There we go. So in here, we need to create credentials. OAuth client ID. It says we still need to configure this. For some reason it hasn't saved this, so we're going to go back into here. And what we're going to do is app name is remeet. Let's go through this all again. And SCC. For now, let's just delete the domain and save and continue. The request failed because one of the fields is not valid, but it's not telling me which one. So this is a pain, but for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat and I'm going to go and use the one from my startup template. So if I just Control Z this, so basically you'll end up with a Google ID and a Google secret, and that's if we save that. We also need to make sure that the next auth secret in here is the same as the next auth secret we created for our dev. So we copy that and paste that into our next auth secret. We can close that. And now that we have that all set up, we can look at our thing, and we've set up Google and we've set up our next auth secret. So now we need to deploy to dev. So all we need to do for that is run npm run deploy dev. And there's a script for this, which is basically going to use the CDK code and it's going to bundle it all up and deploy that into our default account. Obviously, if you want to deploy into a specifically named account, we can also do that. So whilst this is running, we also need, so here you'll see that we're creating a load of Dynamo tables and also giving different Lambda functions the ability to call those tables. And we're just going to hit yes for now, as we want to create all of those. So now that we have that deploying, we can open another tab. And in here, we're going to run npm run dev. And this is going to basically run the local version of Next.js. Actually, let's stop that a sec, because we do need to get the URL so that we are able to actually call the APIs that are generated from our script. So that is saying that there was a deployment error. Requested. So SSR user group already exists. Okay, that's absolutely fine. That is because I'm deploying this into an account where I've already deployed this resource. So if we just search for SSR group, and I am going to change this to be SSR, and I'm going to just add the environment config. So if I do this, so when this next tries to deploy, it will just add the prefix to the group name. So unfortunately, this does mean we need to wait for the CloudFormation to finish rolling back, which does take a little bit of time. But for now, let's go back and start up our Next.js app. And in here, we'll be able to actually look at kind of the landing page that we get by default. So that has finished. So if we go to localhost 3000, what we'll get is we get this default landing page. So this is actually, when you copy the repo, you get a fully working version of an app that I've recently built, which was a waitlist tool. So gather waitlist leads in minutes, not days. And this is basically the landing page you get. You can then go and customize it, change the text, change the images, change all of the icons, and go through and make this into exactly what you want it to be. And yeah, instead of having to design a landing page from scratch, you get all of this built in. And if we click on like get started, we get a sign in. And here, pardon me, we can get Google sign in automatically set up. So I could go with this, and this will sign me up as my user, and it'll land me into my dashboard where I can then create or delete waitlists. Obviously, that's not the app we want, but it's just showing that we have all of this functionality pre-built for you so that you basically have a working app to kind of get used to the SaaS template. So in here, we have things like creating waitlists, upgrades, and stuff like that. But for us, as we said before, we're going to be changing this so it's a meetup style page. So instead of creating a waitlist, you'll have create a meeting. And in here, you can search for the available meetings. If you are wanting other people to meet with you, you can then create your profile and your availability and your interests so that other people can book a meeting with you. So if we go back to our code and find ZSH, that has finished. So that failed because if we scroll up, where is it? Let's find the error message. Yeah, the SSR user group already existed. As we've done, we've gone back in there and updated that to have a prefix. So let's try running that again. So we're going to say yes to deploying all of these changes and resources. Okay, so now that that is deploying, let's hope that that finishes successfully. We can talk about the schema that we want to use, and this is going to be for our database. So let's make that a little bit smaller so it's a little bit out of the way. So in our database, there are kind of two things that are going to exist as kind of entities. There's going to be a user profile, and kind of the access patterns we're going to have for this are basically just going to be a get user profile and update user profile. Those are kind of the access patterns. So it can be relatively simple. All we really need for that is an ID, because if it's the user that has logged in, we can just get it by the ID. But if we're getting something like a meeting, we know that for that meeting availability, we're going to have a ID of the person who created the availability, so we can get it that way. Then the slightly more complex one is going to be the actual availability and meetings. So with meetings, there's going to be a few different things. There's going to be get meeting, get meetings, which is going to be like a query, and that query is going to have the ability to search on both the day of the week as well as the venue and the time. So we need to design a structure that allows us to query on that, but we also want to be able to get and update meetings, which can just be done by a normal like pksk, which is the partition key and sort key, which will just be a meeting ID. So because this does have a slightly more complex structure, we're going to design something. Let's ignore those recommendations for now. So this is going to have a partition key, and the partition key is going to be kind of a combination. So that's going to be something that looks like this. The partition key for meetings is going to be booked or available. So whether this meeting is available or it has been booked. Then we're going to have the day of the week. And then we're going to have the venue. So that means that each partition is going to be for a specific day and a specific venue. Then our sort key is just going to be the time. And then it's going to be not the meeting ID, but let's call it the owner ID. So whoever created this availability meeting, they can see basically they are added in here. So that means that when we do a query to get or a search for the meetings, we can do something where we say, I want to get all available meetings on Tuesday at the Venetian. And we could ignore the sort key altogether, and that would get every single one of the available meetings at the Venetian on that day. Or we could add a sort key and say either when the sort key is larger than 2 p.m. if you want every meeting after 2 p.m. Or we could say when the sort key is between, let's say, 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. And that would allow us to basically narrow the window of the events that we are actually searching for. So now that we have this and our deployment is still going in CloudFormation, what we're going to do is we're actually going to make those changes to our database. So in this repo, we have a nice database folder, and all of this is deployed using Dynamo. And behind the scenes, we have a pretty neat tool that I'm pretty proud of building. So in here, we have a set of different basically schemas, and this is using ElectroDB, which is basically a wrapper around DynamoDB, which makes querying and creating tables way easier. And the smart thing is, if you create a new table in this folder, and if you change any of the properties in here, when you do a deployment of the application, it will actually take all of the schema in here and make sure that that is passed into Dynamo. So what we want to do is actually simplify this a lot. So we don't need leads because that's not something we need for our repo. So I'm just going to let's just hit yes on our deployment so that that carries on. And that's just going to create a load of API endpoints as well as all of the permissions that our API endpoints need. But a lot of those we are going to be deleting in a second. So we don't need leads, so let's delete leads. We don't need signups. Actually, let's modify signups. So let's make signups our new profile. Oh, something has errored in here. Image upload Lambda already exists. That's frustrating, but we can sort that out in a sec. So here we're going to change the name to profile, and the attributes on a profile will have a name, an email, and let's delete some of these. Name, email, and let's add a description, and let's add also their interests, and that is going to be an array of strings. So in here, let's jump across into ElectroDB just so you guys can see it. And this is a really cool tool that even if you're not using my tool, then it's a nice way of kind of wrapping Dynamo to make querying and getting records and creating things much easier. And if we go into schemas, we can see that there are loads of different values, and what we want to do, so we want to say that you can have an array of strings. So type is set, items is string, and we're going to go back into here and paste that into interests. So interests will be basically an array of strings. Let's ignore that for now. So then when we get to actually querying it, so here is kind of one of the really nice things around Dynamo, around this ElectroDB, is that kind of you can create the indexes in here and they'll be brought into our app. So for actually creating our profile, we don't need a second index, so we can just delete this. And I'm going to change this from being sign up to profile. So there's going to be a single index called profile where the PK is going to be email. Nope, is going to be one extra attribute we can add onto this is going to be is going to be user ID type string, and this is just going to be user ID. And at the bottom we just need to change this, so we're going to export profile and we're going to export the profile record. So this is super useful because if you do update the properties in here, the profile record, which is just a TypeScript type, can be used around your app, and you know that whatever you have in your database is going to match whatever you're expecting to get. So with that all done, we can move on to the next one. I'm just going to, so the user record is something that comes from DynamoDB. and auth. So we're going to leave the user record, but waitlist we can delete. Templates, let's change the template. So the second thing we talked about is meetings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to be a meeting and change the name to be meeting. And at the bottom, we're also going to need to export meeting. Delete all of this and change template record to be meeting record. So if we scroll up, and what we're going to do is we're just going to delete some of these. So there is going to be a meeting ID, which is going to be the random, this is going to be the ID of just this meeting. As well as that, there's going to be, what did we say? There's going to be available, which is a Boolean. And then there's also going to be the day, type string, required true, as well as the venue. That's going to be type string. And if I can type correctly, so that's venue. So now that we have that, we have the day, the venue, and finally we're going to have the time. And that is going to be a number. Let's delete the rest of this. So there's going to be a meeting ID, and actually we don't need, let's keep the meeting ID because we want to be able to get just the individual record. And then we also want to be able to query where available on a day and a venue, or if there is a specific time. I'm also going to add in the owner ID, which is a string, and that is required. And I'm also going to add a final field, which is going to be other, other participant ID. And that is going to be a string. And it is not required because when we first create an available slot, there isn't going to be another participant. But once they book that meeting, there's going to be another participant so that we can see that that meeting is booked between the owner and the other participant. So first, we want to change the indexes. So the first things we're going to do is we're going to be able to get, let's call it by ID, where the PK is going to be a composite field, and it's just going to have meeting ID. And we can delete the template and the casing. So basically we have this where we can say, just get me the meeting ID by ID. The other way is get it by, let's call it by query, because we are going to be just querying on this, and there's going to be a partition key, and that field is going to be the global secondary index partition 1, the partition key of that, and the sort key is going to be global secondary index. And I'm going to change this to be by query. So this is going to be a composite, which means that we can do what we did before. We can say that this is going to be a composite key between the available, day, and venue. Yes. So what this has done is this has changed our template to say that this is going to be the structure available, hashtag day, hashtag venue. So that's going to be our partition key. And our sort key is going to be, again, it's going to be a composite, and it's going to be time and also owner ID. This way, we can basically filter on the time. If we save all of that, and again, we're using the structure of time hashtag owner ID, making sure time comes first. So in our sort key, we can basically say, get me available on Tuesday in the MGM. And then our sort key can say between the times of 1 and 3. Or we could say, actually, I don't care what the sort key is. So it'll get me all of the available meetings on that day in that venue. So we've got that. And I'm just going to change the file names from signups to profile, and from templates, I'm going to change templates to meeting. So in our index, we also need to change our imports. So import meeting from meetings. We don't have the waitlist, we don't have the lead. And finally, signups, change that to profile. So the two tables that we've created are the meeting table and the profile table. So if we save all of this, this is just our notes, so we can close that. Don't need to save that. And what will happen is when we next run our deployment, it will take the meeting and the profile table, and it will actually create those Dynamo tables. Now, one thing that was happening in here is the image upload Lambda was failing because it already exists. So in our CDK repo, if we go into constructs and API, we have the image upload endpoint, and that is actually called from our dynamic stack. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to comment out the stack. So if I scroll down to this leads, Stripe. Okay, so we're not going to be using any leads. So I can just comment out the lead endpoint. Stripe, we can just leave that for now. Waitlist endpoints, this is what we're going to be changing in a second, because we don't want there to be a waitlist endpoint, so we want there to be meeting endpoints. And finally, image upload. This is the one that's failing, but because we don't need image upload at the moment, we can comment that out. So now that we have all of that, and we also don't need Stripe webhooks because, we aren't using Stripe because this is going to be a free tool. And that also means we don't need the Stripe endpoints. And these were endpoints for creating things like the checkout session and things like that. So now the only thing we are deploying is waitlist endpoints. But as I said, we are going to change those in a second. So if we now go into our code and run npm run dev again, this should hopefully now deploy, but I'm just going to check that in here. So now this is kind of one of the smart things that's happened. So when we edited the tables that are available, those tables are available in our CDK under props.tables. Because the tables because we changed and removed like the waitlist table and the templates table, those are now no longer available on here. So we can't get the permissions for them. So I'm just going to actually let's do things properly. Let's actually change the waitlist endpoints. So in here, what endpoints do we need? We need a create profile and an update profile. We also need let's do a get profile as well. Actually, no, get profile, that will be done inside our code in Next.js, because Next.js can actually do server-side rendering, so it can get all the data first. So these are just for basically change requests. So we can create a profile, we can update a profile. As well as that, we want to be able to dynamically query a set of meetings. We don't want to get any meetings, because getting an individual meeting, that'll be done by a URL, and that URL be able to pre-serve it in Next.js. So what else do we need to be able to do? Once you've created a profile, you also need to create available meetings and update available meetings. So query meetings and book meetings. And what I'm going to do is I am going to basically go and create each of these as functions and then as API endpoints. So in here, there's not going to be called the create waitlist Lambda. Let's change those. And this is going to be called create profile Lambda. Save that. And what this create profile, this needs access to tables.profile, and it also needs to be able to read from the user table, but it doesn't need access to any of the other tables, in our case meetings, because all we're doing is creating the profile. And in here, it's going to be create profile. Save all of this, and the path is going to be a post to profile, and that is basically our first endpoint. Updating profile, I'm just going to copy that and paste that above here, and joy of cursor, it is going to go through and update all of the things that need to be updated. So here we've now got an update profile Lambda, and it's going to update a function called update profile. Let's check that up here. So here, create profile, that's better. Update profile, and here this has the ability to read and write the profile data. We're creating a new endpoint at profile, and that is going to be a put request. Now, what's next? Create available meeting. Let's copy that, minimize some of this. Okay, so download signups. Just hit tab, this will go through and it will update all of these. So here we are creating available meetings Lambda that is on the path of functions meeting. Let's change that in the other one as well. That's going to be profile and profile. So we have the create profile, update profile, create available meeting. We need to just do one for update available meeting. So that's create available meetings lambdas. We haven't actually finished that. So we've changed the permissions, but this hasn't changed. So there's going to be a create available meeting endpoint. Let's see if it fixes this. Yes. So yeah, we've now updated the endpoint as well. Now we can go back down to here and say that this is going to be the update available meeting. As we go through, Cursor AI is basically just changing the values in here. So we want to be able to update available meetings. And then finally, query meetings is next. So we want to have meetings to query meetings. That's all in Node.js. We want to change this so this has the ability to query the meetings, but we also need to say that this has access to the tables. So props dot tables dot, and now we have access to the three kinds. So I'm going to go profile dot grant read data, and in here we've now changed the endpoint to be query meetings, meeting query. It's a GET request. We're going to pass in the things as a query string parameters, such as the availability, the day, the venue, and the times. And that is that. So what's our final one? So scroll back up to the top. We have book meeting. It's just meant to be book meeting. And cancel meeting is actually a good point. We also need to be able to cancel a existing meeting. So here, delete waitlist. We can change that to be book meeting. This will then go through and change all of the things in here. So the function name is now book meeting. Props, the table has access to read and write data on meetings table, and it also has access to the profile, which I'm not sure we need. Do we need to be able to read data from the profile? Yes, we do, because we need to be able to get the email, and we need that email so that we can send an invite to their Google Calendar. Let's go through and fix the rest of this. And save that. And now we can do cancel meeting. Now this is where I really hope that Cursor AI is going to just do a really good job. And it's going to create first the node function of cancel meeting Lambda. It says it's going to be under functions, meeting, cancel meeting. It's going to have a handler, and that is the default config. As well as that, it's going to say we need to have access data to the meetings table. And we also want to have props.tables.profile, and we want to be able to read both the profile props.tables.user. And I'm actually going to add that ability to add to read data from the user to the book meeting, because if a user has signed up, we have their email because they use Gmail, but we don't have, they might not have actually created a profile when they book a meeting. That means that if they haven't done that, we haven't created a profile for them. So we're going to have to get their email from the user itself instead. So we just need to have that as like a fallback option. So in here, we then have the cancel API endpoint, and that is everything. Now, obviously, because we've created all of these, we need to have the actual functions. So where we have that is if we go back into our code, there's a folder called Lambda and functions. In here, we have a load of different functions, and we're going to actually just go through and delete a few of them. So we don't need the image upload, but we're going to leave that there. The leads one we can delete. Stripe one and the webhook, those are to do with payments and Stripe. We can leave the code in here because if we want to add payments in the future for some upgrade feature, that would be nice to have. But the waitlist is where we're going to be changing things. Because we don't have waitlists anymore, we have profiles and meetings. I'm going to create a new folder, and we're going to start with profile. So if we go up to our first one, our first function is called create profile.ts. And if I create a new file in here called create profile.ts, and I'm just going to copy all the code from create waitlist and paste it in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tidy a couple of things up. I'm going to basically create an empty function that doesn't actually do anything. And what we can do is we can just go through here and delete basically everything. And delete that, delete the user body tests. And I'm just going to leave it here. We can stringify an empty object. So in here, we can just go through and delete all of the code. And we're basically left with a default structure. So this is a Lambda function, so it's pretty simple to use. We get an event that gets passed in from API gateway. And if you want this to be an authenticated API, all you need to do is say const session auth error equals await auth, and then pass in the event. This is a smart little wrapper that I've built, which basically takes the cookies that come from the Next.js next auth, and it works out if there is a session or if there was an error. If there is an auth error, it sends that auth error back. That could be that they're not logged in and it will automatically redirect them. It could be something else. Also, if there's not a session, then we don't have any session data to work with, so we want to also say that that is an unauthorized request. In here, once we've got past these stages, here, this is where you'd put add your business logic here. So you can add as much business logic here as we need, and then return that as a 200 if it succeeds, or return it as like a 500 if there's an unexpected error. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy this code and use that as our template to create all of the other Lambda endpoints. So as well as create profile, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into here, and actually I'm going to close everything just to keep things tidy. Go up to our waitlist endpoints, and actually, because this is no longer our waitlist endpoints, this is going to be meeting profile endpoints, and that's everything. So those are all of our endpoints. I'm also going to change the name of the file, because leaving it as waitlist endpoints is a bit silly. I can also delete any of the unused ones. So we didn't need the leads one because we're not using a waitlist at the start. So we can now go into our dynamic infrastructure and change this from being waitlist endpoints to meeting profile. Change that, and now we have our CDK with our dynamic stack. And our dynamic stack, let's actually just delete all of these and all of these just to make things a lot cleaner and a lot neater. So the endpoints we have are our meeting profile endpoints. That's all coming from our CDK. And that's all we really need to do. But again, we can continue. So we have done our create profile Lambda. So let's actually move this onto the side. And on the left, as well as a create profile, we want to update a profile. So profile.updateprofile.ts. So create a new file, updateprofile.ts. And again, I'm just going to paste in the default Lambda that we created just a minute ago. Save that. That is our update profile. What else do we need? After update profile, there's going to be meeting / create available meeting. So let's delete all of the waitlist functions and create a new file called meeting.createAvailableMeeting. And this is going to be very simple. We're just going to go through, and for each of the Lambda functions, we're going to paste in something that at the moment has no business logic. So that's creating available endpoints. We're going to do that same thing for updating. So go back down to meetings, new file, update available meetings, and paste it in. Now we're on to querying. So query meetings.ts, new file, paste it in, paste that in, close that. Book meeting.ts, save that. And if anyone has any questions at any point, just let me know and we can go through those. Finally, we have cancel meeting. So if you have booked something and you either can't make it, obviously we don't want someone to turn up to a meeting and then the other person isn't even there. So let's create a new file called cancel meeting. Paste that in there. And now we have all of our API endpoints inside. So let's do this properly. So in our dynamic, so inside our dynamic infrastructure, which is going to be basically all of our API endpoints and our Dynamo tables. So we have our HTTP API, and that has endpoints for meeting profiles. We've created a Lambda function and an API endpoint for create profile, and that goes to the code of profile, create profile, and that is empty. We did the same thing for update profile, same thing for create available meetings, update available meetings, query, and booking, as well as also cancelling. So now that we have all of that, we are going to try and deploy again. But as you can see, there are some errors in our code, and that is because we are trying to import things that don't exist. So I'm just going to fix all auto-fixable details and delete any of the imports that we aren't using. And there we go. So now we've got a much cleaner stack. So we can now run deploy dev, and this will hopefully deploy basically just our new endpoints that have our new code, which at the moment our new code is empty, but that's all we really need. So we can say yes to changing these IAM permissions, and it will start deploying. So this is really cool, and we're basically creating all of our APIs, but we want to also have a front end that works for this as well. So if we go into another terminal, and if we go actually cross back into our thing and localhost, obviously this is now erroring, and that's because waitlist.ts doesn't exist anymore because we deleted it because we don't need it. So what we want to do is actually go into our app, and we'll start doing some front end. So inside our app, this is basically just the apps section of a Node.js application. So there is a page, and this page is basically our landing board. But we can change things in here. So actually, if we go across into here and go back to the home page, refresh the page. It's saying that waitlist is not available, so it can't actually render the page. So we need to go into our dashboard. Let's see if I can just refresh this. No. So let's go in here. And here we're trying to import the waitlists like that, but we don't have that ability anymore because we don't have waitlists. And in here, so we're going to have a welcome message saying, hey, welcome Sam Williams, and then my waitlists. So we're just going to delete that for now. And what we're going to do is we're just going to create a very blank kind of application. And from there, we can basically create we're going to be using V0 to actually create a lot of the UI componentry, which will allow us to basically speed through the development of the application. So if we go into here, failed to read source code from index.ts inside the database. So let's minimize everything, go to, oh shit, have I deleted the database? Let's do some control Zing. It appears I've accidentally deleted the database folder that I created earlier. Or have I just, no, I accidentally just moved it somewhere. So this just needs to go back here. There we go. Yeah. Sometimes that happens where you drag something into a folder and it looks like it goes missing. So this is our homepage, and as we scroll through, we go through to here and we get a pricing section, which obviously looks a bit weird because we have no pricing because it's a free app. So what we can do is we can go into our app and go to our page, and we can basically delete this section and delete that from our pricing. If we go in here again and refresh, that pricing section is gone. If we want, we could go through and actually tweak all of the UI in here, but I'm going to leave that for later. Because what's more interesting for us is what's happening inside the dashboard. So inside our dashboard, we have the home page, which at the moment is just going to say, is going to get the server session and then say, hello, Sam Williams. So if we click on here, we get this blank page. Now on the left, we have a create waitlist, but we don't actually want that anymore. And we also don't want the upgrade. So we have a layout. And in here, if we go into layout, we can basically try and find our code. So here's children. And here's our side nav. And here, so if they're a paying user, handle billing, else upgrade. Because we don't have payment or billing at all, we can just delete all of that. And now when we go back in, that has disappeared. We still want our dashboard because we want to be able to actually see the meetings that we have. But I'm going to change this to be a link to the profile. So in here, instead of it being create waitlist, it's going to be profile, and the path is going to be profile. So that now means inside our dashboard, let's go back to here. So dashboard, we don't have a waitlist page, so we can delete that. We don't have an upgrade page, so we can delete that. Edit waitlist, don't need that. Create waitlist page. What we do need is we need to create a new folder called profile, and on that profile, page.tsx. So this is where we can start doing some smart things. If we go over into Vercel, so if you haven't used Vercel, it's V0, it's a really cool tool that allows you to very quickly make Next.js components. So in here, I'm going to say create a page component that allows a user to set their what was it we had in our user. Let's go back into our actual code. Let's just close everything and go to our database. What properties are they able to set on the profile? Name, name, the email, that's going to come from when they sign up. The user ID, that's also going to come, from when they sign up. So basically description, interests, and name are the three things. Their name, write a description that is at least 100 characters, and choose their interests. Interests are a select from a list of options. Let's see what it does with this. So there we go. We've now just created a component, and that looks pretty damn nice. We might need to change some of the styling of it later, but what we can do is we can go to our user profile.tsx and basically just copy all of this. Let's just check if it's doing anything strange. Actually, let's add a couple of other things. Let's say we're going to pass in, so basically, because we also know the email and the name that comes from Google. Actually, let's say we're not going to allow them to change the name, but we are allowing them to change the description and interests, but we can also show their email. Going to pass in the listing, pass in, let's say, the name, email. I think it's just, we're going to pass in the name and email. Show those as non-editable fields. So this is going to take a little sec. And interestingly, it's going to go through and it's going to recreate it, but it's going to add the props of name and email. And in here, great. Oh, what's it saying now? Yeah, basically all it's doing is telling us how to actually use this component. So if we copy this whole file, go back into our code, and in here, I'm going to add a new component, and I'm going to create a new file called update user profile .tsx and paste in our code. So this is now throwing an error saying that @components UI input isn't working, and that is probably because it is expecting us to have some components pre-created for it. Yeah, so how do we fix this? Actually, what we're going to do is going to go back in here and choose a UI library. So if we go into, where's our package JSON? Let's check if we have a library already installed. So, Tailwind. So use Tailwind to style these the components instead of importing them. So this will probably go through, and where it's done, like here is an input that it's trying to import. Yeah, so it was originally using shad cn UI, which is something I've not used before. And I didn't have it imported into the code. So let's see what it's done here. So it looks pretty much exactly the same. It's just working its way through. There we go. And in here, so now if we copy all of this, we now don't have any of those imports at the top, so that we basically don't have any extra dependencies. So if I now save this and check, that all looks good. So that update user profile component is great. So if we go into our profile page, and in here, I'm just going to run a command and say, create a page that gets the user and profile from the database, and then passes them to the update user profile component. Now, obviously, there are typos in my commands, but what I found is that actually most of the time it doesn't really care. So that's done. So let's accept that. So if we delete this, and we can go auth options, quick fix. Great. So this has created a new profile page where it's going to get the server session and check that. We don't actually need to do that because that is done inside the layout here, and our session is kind of passed in. So in here, we can say, here's our session. And I'm just going to make that into, if not session, return auth. That's fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the user ID and we're going to get the profile. So if we've got the profile, we can just return that. We can also get the user ID. So let user, and then if there is not a profile, actually, we don't need to get the user directly because the user here itself has name, email, and image. Since we only need the name and email, we're going to say we're going to get the profile, and update is going to be const update user profile, and it's not going to be the component, it's going to be props and that is going to be update user profile props is going to be the profile, and here just change this to be data like that. So we're actually going to get the profile from the data. So the name is going to be either profile.name or session.user.name, or if that doesn't exist, it's going to be nothing. But hopefully we should have either a profile or the session name. If they don't, that's a bit worrying. And if we go back into our component, we can just export this interface. And in here, we can also, let's say we also want to be able to pass in a description and interests, because if they are updating the profile, then we need to actually allow us to pass in the description and interests, because otherwise they're just going to be setting them each and every time. So now we're getting an error because description and interests are taken. So I'm going to call this, just rename this to be underscore description, and actually initial interests, and change this to be initial description. And what we can do is we can just use the initial description or empty, initial interests or empty. So basically what we're saying here is that we can, if we need to, pass in the description and interests. If we do pass in a description or interests, we use those to start to basically initialize the description and interests used in the component. So save all of that, and if we go back to our page, we can change this to be user profile props, which we can import from update user profile. And here it's saying we can change it so that we're just passing in our props, and description and interests can also be passed in. So that is our new component. So let's basically try it out. Let's go back into here, go into our home, and if we click on profile, so at the moment it's throwing an error because we're trying to access SaaS. SaaS user is not able to access SaaS profile development. So for some reason, I think I know what it is. If we kill this, we need to, when we create this, we are getting the initializer from the start of the prefix, sorry. So in our code, when we do this profile.get, this profile is using process.env.app prefix, but in our local.env, we didn't change our app prefix to match what we got before. So in our config, we need to change our app prefix to be remeet and save that. And whilst we're at it, let's have a look back at our code. Still some more things need to be deployed. So this might be another reason, is that the database actually hasn't been deployed. So this may take another couple of seconds, but now that we've done that, if we go back into our second one and run npm run dev, now what's going to happen is it's going to be trying to query the right table at least, because we're going to be using the right app prefix. And if we go into here and go to profile, it's probably going to throw an error, but it's going to be a different error. So now it's saying the user that we're using locally is not authorized to perform get item on remeet profile development. That is great, because we're now at least trying to access the right Dynamo table. So once that has all done, what this will actually output at the end of all of this is this will output a set of IAM credentials, and those IAM credentials I can copy into my my local env, so that is the credentials the profile is going to be used. So that has all finished. And what I'm going to do is, in another tab, I'm going to sign in to my AWS account, and I'm going to get those credentials and copy those into the local .env file, and that will give the local Next.js app permissions to actually query our table. Okay, so of course, MFA, that's always the way. Five, 2, 8. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do this, but I'm going to do this on the other side so that you can't see the credentials and I don't have my AWS account hacked. So I'm in here. And all I'm doing is I'm going into the CloudFormation console. And in here, I will see our new deployment of our remeet infrastructure. And the outputs of that include an access key and a secret key, which I can use inside my local env. And that will just allow us. So now back in here, if we go into our node, kill this, restart it, we're now going to be using an updated set of credentials. So in our code, if we switch these around because that's easier, refresh the page, let's see if this new set of credentials allow us to access the Dynamo table. There we go. So it's asking us to sign in again. Sign in as Sam Williams. So I'm back on the profile page. If I click on profile, there we go. So it's taken my name from my Google Auth sign in. It's taken my email address, and I can now add a load of characters, and I can select my interests. So here, that doesn't look very good because it is basically going outside of the basically the scroll option isn't allowing me to go outside. So if we go back into here and go into into the preview, I'm going to basically just use v0 to fix this. When I have a long list of interests, opening the drop down, doesn't extend past the make it so that the drop down select, let's say, starts at the bottom here and goes over. Does that work? Can only go as low as the bottom of the main component. No idea if this is actually going to work. And yeah, this is one of the things that is sometimes a bit tricky with these AI things, is that they create what they know, but sometimes there are things that just don't quite work. So this is going to regenerate that component. And yeah, we're going to see if this is going to fix it. So it's still loading, and I think it's just doing the save button at the bottom. Yeah, there we go. That has, I think that's fixed it. So yoga is the bottom one. Yes. So that works, and that is now bound. So that is the bottom, and you can see a little bit of a round. I'm just going to say move the, so instead of trying to fix this, I'm going to basically move the interests above the description. So that it can extend further down. Also, here are the new props. So one thing is that we know in our code, we actually went and updated the user profile because we added the description and interests. So I'm just going to copy that, and actually I'm going to copy from here up to there and paste that in, because we don't want to have to remake that change every single time. Now it knows that that is the new props, but it also wants to rearrange it. So it's going to go through and rebuild that. As we can see, description interests, it's basically copied the code that we've asked it to, and it's then going to go and do the change. So as you can see, we're on an hour and a half, and we have our APIs deployed, and we have an app that is starting to come together. It's still working. Let's see what's happening in the code. Yeah, it's writing more lines for the description area. And finally, yeah, and one nice thing is, if you are learning to use React or Next.js, you can actually go in here and it will actually tell you, here are the key changes I've made. And it will describe initializing the description and interests, updating the props, moving the interests. So now if we click on this, that's much better. It's a much longer list, which is going to be easier. Instead of having like 2.5, you can actually see quite a few of the options at the same time. And actually, now that I've closed it, it has that nice little look. Let's see, actually, I noticed that this component gets wider every time you add more. That's not great. So when I have multiple, I'm going to use my voice thing. Interest selected. the width of the component gets wider. I want it to have a max width, and for the, I don't know how to call them, icons below to wrap around. So yeah, what we're going to try and do is try and fix it so that every time I add more of these, that width doesn't get wider, because yeah, that's not the most attractive of designs. It does mean that the height of the component may change, but I think that's a lot less intrusive. Sweet, that's done. So if I now check a couple of these, it hasn't done that. So let's see if it's just because I've not, there we go. It's just because I hadn't got to that max width. So if we add more now, there is a wrapping, but it's, so what we can do is we know that max width 2xl, we can basically just change that to be just width 2xl so that this is always the same size. But what we'll do now is just copy all of the code, go back into cursor and find this component. Actually copy it. There we go. Save this. And if we find, don't want to find that, want to find 2xl. Let's change that just to be width 2xl. Now, when we go back into here, that's changed. So let's undo this. Let's add loads of these. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, so that's working. So as we add or remove these, is the size of this component changing at any point? No. That is good. So yeah, there we go. We have our update profile. We can add this. Obviously, the update profile at the moment isn't going to work because I need to add 100 characters, which can take ages. There you go. And then we could click update profile. That hasn't actually been connected to our API, so let's do that now. Also, profile settings, it's kind of useless having that on the page. So in our profile page, we just want to remove that. And that's much cleaner. I'm going to add some padding to the top. Let's just, because I can never remember my, yeah, I am very much a software architect and backend engineer, so I'm not super up on my Tailwind. Add margin to the space update from the top. Accept that. Let's see if that's worked. Save that file actually. Okay, so let's do it the other way. Go back into here. Find this component. And that's the component we're actually going to be changing. We've changed the MT8. Margin. Oh, it's going to be padding. Top. There we go. Yeah, so it's padding at the top, not margin. So I'm going to change that PT8. Inspect on this. PT8 didn't seem to work, so I'm just going to Google PXPY PY8. There we go, that's a little bit nicer, just having a bit of extra space at the top. So that's our profile. We can add some stuff. I'm just going to cheat and go to LinkedIn, find my own profile. Copy that. And I'm going to use that for testing for now on. So I can paste that in. Hey, I've got a nice long description. Once I've selected at least one interest, I could hit update. But obviously that's not going to do anything at the moment because we don't have the endpoint. We don't have the API. So if we go back into profile and in here, so we have the description and interest. And here we basically make sure that the description length is over 100, interest is more than 1, and we are here. So we can now, here is where you typically send the data. So I'm going to use a tool that I've added to this called fetch. It's basically a wrapper around fetch, which uses the Next.js auth. So I can say const use fetch API equals use fetch API, and I can import that. And then when we want to use our code, we can just say fetch API post. So the URL So what we're doing here is we're saying we're going to call our fetch API, and if you're interested, you can go into this use fetch, and what we're doing is we're just taking the parameters and we're adding an authorization string to our request. That authorization string can be taken apart inside our Lambda API, and instead of you having to manually remember, oh, I need to add the auth string, I need to get that auth string from the auth context, you can just use this use fetch API, wherever it is, which creates our fetch API, and then you can call that, passing in the same exact config as you would for any other fetch API. I just need to change this to be async so that we can use the await. And here I'm also just going to wrap this in a try because sometimes things may error and we don't want them to. So that has now saved, and it's not going to be called api.profile. What we're going to do is we're going to change this into a template string. And here we are going to put this. And if I just search for fetch API, there'll be other examples where we are using it. API lead, profile. There we go. Where we use the Next.js public API URL, which is an environment variable. And if we paste that in there, And one thing we now also need to do is back in our CDK deployment, when we deployed our CDK, we got the remeet API URL. So what we can do is we can copy that, and we need to add that in a couple of places. So in our config, this should all have it, but in our env.local, we need to paste it in here. So let's close that, search, and like that. Damn it, save. So now we have our Next.js public API URL. And let's go back into... So now that we have that, we know we're going to be using the correct URL to hit profile. And yeah, we'll have an error, a response. And so, yeah, let's console log out the updated profile. And basically just refresh the page, because when we refresh the page, we're going to get the user profile. So page dot refresh router reload. So this is all running in here. So now when I refresh this page, there's nothing. Let's paste in my description, click a couple of options, and obviously I need to go through and actually change what these options are. And now make sure we have our networking open, close this and hit update. It's now saying sign in with this. It's saying there was a 401. If we look at the headers, it looks like it should have succeeded. So log in, continue, profile, paste, select some interests. So if this errors again, we know that there's an error in our authentication logic. Yes, so it is automatically redirected us to the login, which means there's something going wrong in our Lambda. If I go across and find the world of Lambda and I search for last updated, and it's going to be create profile. And if I go into monitoring, let's have a look at what the logs were for that. Let's open up two. So in here, we actually have hit our API because we have some logs. We can see the event that has been sent through. And that's about it. So what we can do is we can basically add some extra logs to our API. And I suspect it might be that our authorization has a quote mark at the start. I don't know, because there's one there as well. But yeah, let's go into our code, and inside our Lambda functions profile create. So obviously what's happened is there's been an auth error. So in here, let's just add a couple of console logs. Add the tokens. Token from get token. And if we just run in here, npm run watch, let's just check I've got the right command. Where is it? Yes, CDK npm run watch will run CDK watch for dev. And this will basically rebuild all of our Lambda functions, and then it will also allow us to basically monitor them from here, so we don't have to go into CloudWatch logs every single time. So if I go and let's make that full screen. Go in here and paste that in, select my interests, clear this and hit update. It's still going to error. We know it's going to error and we know it's going to do that, but we should see in a second the messages coming through in here. Hmm? 20 past 12. Okay. So that has all gone through, and if we click create profile and refresh this, that doesn't look like it has updated. So let's just deploy dev, and this will actually deploy the full code, as it didn't seem like watch seemed to actually deploy. There we go. Yeah, so it's updating all the lambdas. And if we go back, we can paste this in, select an interest, and once this has happened, update complete. There we go. Yeah, so our stack is updated. We've got our new code. Kill this, update profile. It's going to redirect us as we expected, but we can now go into here, refresh. So those are the tokens. We have an authorization, next auth callback, auth, and session token, but the token from get token is null. That just means that there's a little bug in my code. So inside here, this get token is failing. And this is a function that comes from next auth. And so what it's looking for is the cookies. So I just need to go and fix this mapper, because what this is doing is it's taking the tokens and it's mapping them onto cookies, but it must be doing that slightly wrong. But we've already started and we've got to the point where we've got this component. And in the next stream, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the ability to create your availability and then book and do sessions. Unfortunately, I do need to jump off now, but yeah, hopefully that was useful and some of you got to see how you can, well, in under 2 hours, create some APIs and add in some authentication logic.